something unbelievable just happened in court. Something that could change Blake Lively's career forever. In a packed courtroom filled with lawyers, reporters, and stunned onlookers, Hollywood's carefully curated illusion shattered as Blake Lively had what insiders are now calling a full-scale courtroom meltdown. And the trigger, a single moment, a single testimony, and a shocking truth revealed by none other than Justin Baldoni. This isn't just celebrity drama, this is the unraveling of a story that's been spun behind the scenes for over a year. For months, fans and the media have speculated about the tension between Lively and Baldoni. Whispers of a broken professional agreement, hints of behind-the-scenes manipulation, allegations of private messages and public deception. But now it's all coming out in open court, and the truth is even more explosive than anyone expected. Baldoni, once seen as the quiet figure in the background, has come forward with emails, memos, and sworn statements that paint a very different picture from the one Lively has presented in interviews and press releases. And when those revelations were laid bare in court, the reaction from Lively was immediate and emotional. Her outburst, caught in vivid detail by courtroom observers, wasn't just a lapse in composure. It may have been the moment her legal strategy started to collapse. And what followed, a wave of public reaction, media analysis, and even silent shifts within Hollywood itself. Friends turned quiet, allies began to back away. The question now isn't just whether Blake Lively will win this case, it's whether her entire public image, one that took over a decade to build, can survive what's being exposed. Because make no mistake, the courtroom isn't just revealing legal facts. It's revealing the real story. The courtroom was supposed to be a place of resolution, a venue where facts would rise above emotion, where truth would calmly surface through the careful work of legal professionals. But instead it became a storm. Not a sudden shocking outburst, but a slow-building wave of tension that erupted finally and dramatically when Blake Lively lost control. We begin at the center of a case that's been brewing for months. Hollywood actor and producer Justin Baldoni stepped forward, not just with legal claims, but with something far more damning: documentation, testimony. And as many insiders would later call it, the full story. It was a narrative that clashed directly with the clean, composed image Blake Lively had spent years curating. It was also a version of events that she and her team weren't ready to face publicly. And once it was introduced, everything changed. This wasn't a typical legal battle over contracts or miscommunication. No, this was a defamation case layered with public perception, alleged manipulation of the press, weaponized PR, and, according to Baldoni's team, efforts to silence the truth. At the heart of it all, a partnership gone wrong, a set of promises made and then shattered, and an avalanche of private correspondence, behind-the-scenes memos, and deleted communications that would become courtroom exhibits. On the surface, the case had the hallmarks of a typical Hollywood feud: big names, dramatic headlines, and a tangled mix of public support and criticism. But as soon as the court opened its doors to evidence, this wasn't just celebrity gossip anymore. It became deeply serious. Allegations that Blake had misrepresented key moments to the media, claims that she or her team had directly interfered with witnesses, accusations of reputation damage so severe Baldoni's entire production company was allegedly impacted. And perhaps most damning of all, internal texts and emails long rumored to exist finally entered the official record. And that's when things took a turn no one expected. Justin Baldoni, known for his calm demeanor and thoughtful advocacy, walked into court prepared. But what shocked many wasn't just the documents he submitted, it was the methodical way in which he revealed them. Each statement had been timed. Each fact matched a supporting piece of evidence. And as he testified, the tone in the courtroom shifted. Jurors leaned in. Reporters looked up from their notepads. Even Blake's own legal team appeared, in several instances visibly rattled. Blake Lively herself, who had largely maintained a graceful posture throughout the trial, appeared increasingly uneasy. Cameras weren't allowed in the courtroom, but multiple journalists described her reactions in detail. A tapping foot, clenched fists, a brief moment where she wiped tears with a tissue before turning away. It wasn't performative, it looked like genuine shock. And that's when whispers began: this isn't going the way she thought it would. Baldoni's testimony touched on professional betrayal, sure, but he also alluded to a deeper manipulation. Without ever directly attacking Blake's character, he laid out a timeline that pointed toward strategic misrepresentation. His words were measured, respectful, but impossible to ignore. One of the key revelations: an alleged private meeting between Baldoni and Lively in early 2023, just months before the public fallout. According to Baldoni, that meeting was a last-ditch effort to resolve growing tensions. In his recounting, he offered Lively the opportunity to clarify statements she had made to the press, statements that he claims distorted the actual terms of their working relationship and put his own credibility at risk, she allegedly declined. But the real shock came when his lawyers introduced a set of emails exchanged. Shortly after that meeting, the tone of those emails different from the one she portrayed in public. Not hostile but far from aligned with the narrative her publicist had shared with outlets at the time. In fact, one of the emails included a sentence many would later quote across social media: "I understand this may be damaging to your platform, but my priorities have changed." Was that the smoking gun? Not quite, but it was close. It introduced doubt, it suggested intention, and it shifted the focus of the trial from a simple misunderstanding to something far more calculated. As the court recessed for lunch that day, murmurs filled the hallway, journalists sent off frantic texts to editors. Commentators online began building timelines of their own, trying to piece together the real story behind the glitz of public appearances and press tours. And most significantly, support for Lively began to quietly fracture, not loudly or dramatically, but in small noticeable ways. Former colleagues refused to comment. Others previously vocal in their praise went silent. One entertainment insider speaking anonymously told Variety, "People are scared to say it out loud, but there's a growing sense that this case is going to expose things none of us were prepared for." Blake returned to the courtroom that afternoon, sunglasses on despite the indoor lighting. Her team huddled around her. The judge's tone grew firmer. Cross-examinations resumed. But the atmosphere had shifted, control was slipping, and when one of Baldoni's attorneys referenced a specific incident that until now had only been a whisper among Hollywood insiders, Blake's composure broke. She stood, her voice raised. The judge quickly instructed her to remain silent, reminding all parties that outbursts would not be tolerated. Her team led her out for a momentary break, but the damage was done. The courtroom wasn't just hearing the case anymore. It was witnessing it unfold emotionally in real time. What followed was a cascade of commentary online, clips of news anchors covering the story began trending. Body language experts weighed in on her behavior. Supporters defended her, saying the pressure was too much. Critics claimed this moment proved what they had suspected all along. And in the middle of it all, Justin Baldoni remained almost eerily calm. His lawyers issued a simple statement that evening: "Our client is committed to transparency. He will not be silenced by mischaracterizations, no matter how widespread or public they become." By the end of that day, a question lingered in every outlet's coverage. If this was only the first week of testimony, what else was coming? The moment Blake Lively stepped out of that courtroom, visibly shaken, escorted by her legal team, sunglasses still masking her face, it was clear something irreversible had just occurred. The headlines weren't far behind. What had started as a tightly managed legal proceeding spiraled into a full-blown media event, and the court of public opinion was quick to render its own verdict. Within hours, entertainment outlets began pushing live updates. Social media turned into a storm of speculation. Hashtag Blake Breaks Down trended on multiple platforms, and users across the internet debated whether the pressure had simply become too much, or if her courtroom reaction was a sign of something deeper: guilt, fear, or perhaps the realization that the narrative was no longer hers to control. What stood out, though, wasn't just the content of the coverage, but its tone. There was a shift, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Outlets that had previously praised Lively for her poise and media mastery were suddenly cautious, careful not to sound too supportive. Publicists, commentators, and Hollywood insiders stopped offering unconditional support. Instead, they spoke in conditionals: "If this is true, assuming the emails are authentic, pending confirmation." Even some of her allies, those with nothing to gain by staying silent, began backing away, issuing carefully worded statements through representatives. One director who had worked with Lively on amateur streaming project declined to comment when asked about the trial. Another, previously seen as a close confidant, reposted an article about accountability in Hollywood without adding any personal caption. The message was subtle but loud enough for audiences to hear. And while Blake's PR team rushed to regain control, releasing a vague statement asking for respect and privacy during this deeply personal matter, Justin Baldoni's team doubled down on transparency. They leaned into the moment, using it not to attack Blake but to clarify their position. "We are not interested in media spectacle," said Baldoni's attorney during a press briefing. That same evening, "This case is about setting the record straight, not in the headlines but under oath. Our goal remains justice, not revenge." And that distinction mattered. Where Blake's approach had always relied on managing perception, interviews, red carpet appearances, curated social media posts, Justin's legal strategy appeared rooted in documentation, receipts, and a quiet but powerful confidence in the facts. It was an intentional contrast, and the public began to notice Still, the meltdown moment had done more than just spark media speculation. It changed how the court itself operated, the judge likely aware of the growing public scrutiny took a firmer hand moving forward. All involved parties were reminded that decorum was non-negotiable, and both legal teams were instructed to avoid media leaks or performative behavior. Courtroom sketches began circulating online, and Blake's every glance, gesture, and sigh became a point of analysis for digital commentators. Then came the second wave, the witnesses. The most explosive testimony of that week came not from a lawyer or a celebrity, but from a former assistant who had worked briefly with both parties during the early stages of their project, referred to only by her initials in court documents. Her appearance was unannounced, catching many reporters by surprise, but her statement was devastating. She described being present at several early meetings where creative visions clashed. According to her, Lively became increasingly territorial over project direction, and frequently dismissed Baldoni's input as off-brand. At first, these were merely creative disagreements, but then as the assistant testified, things took a darker turn. After one disagreement, she recounted, "Blake told us that the only story people care about is the one they're told first, and she made it clear she intended to tell that story first." That line echoed across social media like a drumbeat. It was interpreted not just as a statement about strategy, but as intent, as control, as something more than mere branding. Lively's team, of course, objected. They challenged the assistant's credibility, noting she had only been employed for 3 months and that her departure had been voluntary. But the court allowed the statement to remain on the record. The damage was done. Next came digital analysts, technical experts called to review communications presented by both sides. The court reviewed metadata, timestamps, and patterns of deletion. While the experts did not accuse anyone of tampering, they did point out suspicious gaps in Lively's correspondence during a key 4-week window, precisely the period during which Baldoni alleged their relationship turned adversarial behind the scenes. Lively's defense claimed these gaps were due to automatic phone backups and storage transitions. But once again, the narrative shifted. The court and the public began asking a question Blake likely feared most: what are we not seeing? Behind closed doors, legal strategists say this was the moment Blake's team realized they were no longer just defending her character, they were defending a timeline, a digital paper trail. And that is much harder to control. Public reactions remained split. Loyal fans posted threads dissecting each line of testimony, defending Lively's actions as misunderstood or misrepresented. But neutral observers, especially media analysts and legal experts, grew increasingly cautious in their assessments. Many noted the imbalance in tone, while Baldoni's testimony remained steady, and professional Lively's team began appearing reactive, even defensive. A high-profile entertainment attorney speaking anonymously to an industry podcast said it bluntly: "This case isn't just about who's telling the truth, it's about who looks like they planned to tell the truth from the start." And if there was one person who benefited from the contrast, it was Baldoni. His decision to stay mostly silent outside the courtroom paid off. He let the facts speak for themselves, and every revelation added credibility to his version of events. One after another, people connected to the project, even tangentially, began echoing his concerns. Production designers, assistants, marketing coordinators. None accused Lively of wrongdoing outright, but many painted a picture of disruption, last-minute changes, and selective storytelling. More emails followed, some supportive, others ambiguous. But the trend was undeniable. The closer we got to the actual fallout point, the more the correspondence revealed stress, distrust, and strategic pivots. And then came the leak. Late one evening, a transcript from a confidential mediation session months before the trial surfaced online. Though the court had not officially admitted this as evidence, the content was damning. It included a back and forth between the two teams during an off-record negotiation attempt. While neither side made any admission of guilt, Blake's representative was quoted as saying, "Our client is open to a mutual statement, so long as it avoids referencing the actual chain of events or creative authority." Again, this wasn't a smoking gun, but it reinforced Baldoni's claims. His team had consistently sought public clarity, while hers reportedly preferred carefully worded deflection. The optics were undeniable, and in an industry increasingly focused on authenticity, this gave Baldoni the upper hand. Meanwhile, Blake's team appeared caught between two strategies, defending her legal position while trying to maintain her public image, but each court revelation made that harder. Gone was the confident actress walking red carpets in custom couture. In her place stood a woman facing the full force of scrutiny, legal, emotional, and reputational, and perhaps most critically, the judge appeared to grow skeptical. Legal commentators noted a change in his demeanor, less tolerant of procedural delays. more inclined to allow Baldoni's team room to elaborate. When asked to grant a motion that would have delayed the introduction of new digital evidence, the judge declined. "This case is fundamentally about clarity," he stated, "and this court will not obstruct that clarity." That moment was key. It signaled that the court was no longer swayed by celebrity or media noise. It was focused on truth, and Lively's team would need to meet that standard, regardless of who she was outside those walls. And as the week closed, one final moment sealed the shift in tone. A reporter from a major news outlet asked Baldoni's attorney outside the courtroom, "Do you believe your client will be vindicated?" His reply was succinct: "Vindication isn't the goal. Truth is, and we're almost there." The statement went viral. Blake Lively had not yet testified. That moment was coming. But the question hanging in the air now wasn't just whether her words would hold up, it was whether her version of events could withstand the weight of everything already revealed. And for the first time since the trial began, even some of her fans began to worry. After days of escalating tension, mounting witness testimony, and a barrage of digital evidence, the courtroom entered what many were calling the pivotal chapter of this high-stakes legal drama. Blake Lively's testimony, the build-up was intense. By the time her appearance was confirmed, lines had formed outside the courthouse. Hours before opening, reporters camped out, sketch artists sharpened their pencils, and the courtroom gallery was packed with observers, journalists, and even a few quiet faces from the Hollywood community, friends, colleagues, and silent stakeholders in Blake's reputation. From the moment Blake entered, there was a notable shift in the room. She was poised, her hair pulled back in a deliberate, understated style. No designer labels, no bold fashion statements. She wore muted tones as if to signal humility. But as she approached the stand, the tension in the room could be cut with a knife. Everyone knew that this would either reestablish her version of the truth or further unravel the narrative her team had fought to protect. Her lawyer began with a series of expected questions, setting the stage by establishing her career, her experience in the industry, and the nature of her collaboration with Justin Baldoni. At first, she was composed, even eloquent. She spoke passionately about the creative vision that first brought them together, the mutual excitement they shared, and the deep disappointment she felt when things started to fall apart. But it didn't take long for the cracks to appear. When asked directly about the disputed emails, the ones that allegedly suggested a deliberate effort to control public perception, her demeanor shifted, her eyes darted, her posture tightened. She didn't deny the emails were hers, but instead claimed they were taken out of context and never intended for legal interpretation. The problem: context had already been provided by Baldoni's team and by the sequence of events those emails were tied to. Blake argued that media management is a normal part of public life, especially for women in Hollywood. "We are forced to be strategic," she said. "If we're honest too soon, we're attacked. If we wait, we're liars. We can't win." It was a powerful statement, one that sparked thoughtful debate online and resonated with many. But in the context of a legal case, it lacked the specificity the court demanded. Her answer raised more questions than it resolved, and her cross-examination only made things worse. Baldoni's lawyer stepped forward and calmly began to unravel the thread. With a collection of time-stamped messages, meeting notes, and previously undisclosed memos, she walked Blake through each claim made publicly, then compared it to the internal documentation. One moment in particular sent shockwaves through the courtroom, referencing a 2023 press interview in which Blake had claimed she and Baldoni mutually agreed to step away from the project. Baldoni's lawyer presented a memo from Blake's internal team dated just days prior. The memo outlined talking points that included the line "frame departure" as mutual, avoid implying conflict. When confronted with the memo, Blake's response was telling: "That was standard PR. It didn't reflect my personal truth." But that wasn't the legal question. The court didn't need her personal truth, it needed facts, and at that moment, her carefully composed testimony began to falter. Blake's defense team quickly objected, citing relevance. The judge allowed the cross-examination to continue. The tone of the courtroom grew colder, more exacting. Every statement from Lively was parsed. Every pause felt longer. Social media began buzzing mid-testimony. Courtroom observers live tweeted her stumbles, and legal experts chimed in to explain what went wrong. "Her statements are passionate," one wrote, "but passion won't win against documentation." What made matters worse was her reaction to pressure. As the questioning intensified, Blake grew visibly frustrated. She sighed audibly, gave short responses, and at one point glanced sharply toward her team when presented with a timeline that contradicted her earlier claims. And then came the pivotal moment. Baldoni's team introduced a confidential text exchange between Lively and one of her own producers. The message: "We can't let him speak first. If he frames it as a betrayal, I lose the narrative." Gasps filled the room. It wasn't a direct admission of wrongdoing, but it revealed a calculated awareness of media dynamics and a desire to control perception before facts emerged. Blake's attorney objected immediately, claiming the message was informal, not intended for legal scrutiny, but again the court allowed it in. At that point, Blake's testimony had been undermined not by personal attacks but by her own words. Once court recessed, the media frenzy exploded. Headlines flooded in. Blake Lively text raises questions about narrative control. Lively's testimony collapses under cross-examination. Judge allows damaging text in to record Lively team. Silent talk shows jumped on the story. Evening pundits dissected every line of her testimony. Body language analysts did breakdowns. A clip of Blake being asked about the personal truth comment went viral, with hundreds of thousands debating whether she had just admitted to strategic framing. But what surprised many was the response from other celebrities. Some remained silent, clearly not wanting to be pulled into the storm. But a few close to the situation, particularly those who had previously worked with both Blake and Baldoni, began to speak out. One well-known actress posted cryptically on her Instagram story, "The truth always comes out, always." No names were mentioned, but the timing said everything. Another commented anonymously to a trade magazine, "People are shocked because they believe the brand, not the behavior. This was always coming." At the same time, support for Baldoni grew. He didn't gloat, didn't respond to press baiting, and avoided any appearance of vindictiveness. His silence ironically made his position seem even stronger. He let the court do the talking, and the court was beginning to speak volumes. Legal commentators began predicting that the momentum had shifted so significantly Blake's team would need to pivot entirely, perhaps even settle. But insiders say that option was off the table weeks ago. Too much damage had already been done on both sides. The only way forward was through the fire. Meanwhile, new witnesses were being prepared, among them a former legal consultant hired briefly during the original project development, someone who allegedly raised ethical concerns early on, only to be quietly removed from communications shortly after. Rumor has it this person kept receipts, and if those documents are entered into evidence, they could further corroborate Baldoni's timeline. Public interest surged. People weren't just watching this as a legal case anymore, it had become a cultural reckoning. Commentators drew comparisons to past Hollywood cases but noted that this one was different. Less about criminal behavior and more about manipulation of narratives, of image, of influence. And in a media landscape where authenticity is currency, even the perception of inauthenticity can prove fatal. By the end of that day, a single phrase circulated across newsrooms and social media: "Blake is losing the room." She hadn't broken the law as far as the court had determined, but she had, in the eyes of many, broken something else: trust. And while that isn't grounds for legal conviction, it is powerful in shaping public and professional consequence. Still, the case wasn't over. More evidence was scheduled to be introduced. Baldoni was expected to return to the stand, and most critically, the judge had yet to weigh in on the admissibility of certain financial documents, ones that might trace PR funding, hush arrangements, or payouts related to media exclusives. If admitted, those records could expose not just individual choices but an entire infrastructure of perception management. And that, insiders say, is what Blake's team fears most. As the courtroom lights dim and the cameras outside continue to flash, one thing is certain: this case has already changed everything. What started as a legal disagreement between two high-profile Hollywood figures has spiraled into a revealing drama about control, image, and truth in the public eye. Blake Lively's emotional breakdown in court was more than just a human moment. It became a turning point, a public unraveling that shifted the tone of the trial and cracked the foundation of the story she had worked so hard to shape. Justin Baldoni, once underestimated, has emerged as the composed force leading the charge for transparency. His measured testimony and damning evidence didn't just challenge Lively's version of events. They dismantled it piece by piece, drawing support from unexpected corners and shifting public sympathy in real time. And now all of Hollywood is watching. This case is no longer just about two people. It's about what happens when the curtain is pulled back on how stories are told, how narratives are shaped, and how reputations are built or destroyed by the words we choose to say and the ones we carefully leave out. As we await the final verdict, the question isn't just who wins in court. It's who walks away with their integrity intact. Because long after the legal documents are filed and the media coverage fades, what will remain is the memory of how this trial unfolded and what it revealed about power, perception, and accountability. For Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, the truth is no longer a matter of opinion. It's under oath on the record and echoing far beyond the courtroom walls. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning of the fallout.